never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team. I would be very careful about slinging stuff. Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Happy Mock Draft Monday. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're back. We're live on YouTube. We're over in audio podcast land. More mock draft time, Sam.
Yep. Mine
ready?
this time.
It's yours. Not to give it all away, but it is already posted over at PFF.com.
PFF.com, where the little write-ups are. So obviously I have pre-done this a little bit using the PFF mock draft simulator. PFF.com/mock if you want to follow along. We need to set the rules, though, you know?
Yeah, I need the rules.
Because obviously you're going to hate the mock, but the key is knowing how to hate it. Like,
yes.
What is the way it's wrong? So the rules for this mock, it's what I would do if I was the general manager.
Oh, it is?
Or the person in charge for each one of these picks. Now, I'm the general manager for all 32 teams, right? So this became problematic when I wanted to make trades because I had to like both sides of the trade. I couldn't just be like, well, I want to get out of this spot, let's bounce, and then be stuck with a pick later that I wouldn't have given that up. So I had to make a trade in situations where they came up where I'm like, no, both sides, this makes sense, right? And I also couldn't sort of play the odds, being like, oh, everyone else loves this guy, so let's do this because I'm the other GM. So that became kind of problematic. And if you're sort of playing the game, being like, well, I wouldn't draft this guy, but I know everybody else would. Well, everybody else is me, so that doesn't really work. But the other little modifier is it's also me as general manager sort of within the constraints of each individual team, right? So, I get dumped on the Carolina roster. I'm now in charge of Carolina's draft strategy, but you're aware of what's taken place before you got there. They've traded up. They've invested a lot to get to number one. That's the kind of context you're in charge with.
Yeah, I mean, I had similar issues last week with my mock where I said, it's me as GM. If I keep picking all my favorite players, at some point I'm going to run out of players that I really like. Where in reality, the NFL is going to, other GMs are going to pick players that aren't as high on my board, and I'm going to feel good at pick 20, maybe getting my 10th best player or something like that. So, it's challenging when you do it as GM of all 32 teams. So it's good to get the ground rules out there right now. It's also good to know that the PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves in this mock draft, Western and Southern is helping to advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. And we thank Western and Southern for the Western and Southern studio right here where we're live on YouTube. Tell your friends, come trash Sam's mock draft. Let's get into it. You ready to go?
Sure.
So as I said, it's over at PFF.com. We're going to try. Should we put a time limit on our QB discussion here? How are we going to do that?
Yeah, I don't think it'll take too long. We can certainly get through the first pick or two reasonably quickly. Then there's probably a discussion.
All right, we're allowed to discuss. All right, starting right at the top, the Carolina Panthers. We've seen Bryce Young. We've seen C.J. Stroud. But Sam, your number one overall pick for the Carolina Panthers is?
I went with Anthony Richardson. Now, that's
what you would do.
Yeah, that flies in the face of everything I've been saying so far this draft process.
That's
which
great.
Is that
You're already contradicting yourself.
Bryce Young is the best quarterback prospect in this draft. I still believe that to be true. I think Bryce Young is the best prospect of this draft. However, where the context matters is that Carolina has made this big swing. They've already traded from number 9 to number 1. they need to swing for the fences. And as much as I think Young is the best prospect, I think Richardson is the biggest swing. Like, he's the potential home run. He is the guy that I think probably does have the highest ceiling. My concern with Bryce Young, I think he's the best quarterback, but the size thing, I don't think it's going to stop him being a good NFL player. I do, however, have at least a worry or a concern, or the potential is there that it stops him being a great one. Like we've seen already, quarterbacks, very short quarterbacks, and it's a very small sample size, very short quarterbacks, we're probably talking about two, Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. Drew Brees is 6 foot, that doesn't count. If you're 5'10", it's a different world than 6 foot when you're talking about trying to see over or see between giant 6'5" behemoths in front of you. So you're probably talking about those two guys, and those two guys have had issues playing the game in a conventional manner. They have to do it in a different way. And I just, the Kyler Murray seems to have hit a plateau and now declined. Russell Wilson, for his entire career, basically, no matter how well he was playing, it's like, why have we not, where's the extra couple of percent that we think is there? And we thought it was the coaching, and it turns out the coaching might have been the only thing propping him up to where he was. So my only concern is, are we limited to a good NFL quarterback with Bryce Young? And if he becomes a good NFL quarterback, is that enough given where Carolina traded from and what they want to achieve here? If you take a swing at Richardson and you fix his accuracy, there is this Josh Allen's it's like comparing people to Aaron Donald. It's kind of unfair because he's a one of one sort of reclamation project. But if you do manage to get his mechanics working and get him 10% more accurate, you have created something that is unparalleled in the NFL in terms of potential. I think that's worth the swing. People will forgive that, Whereas if you draft Bryce Young, you get a capable starter, but it's not enough to take you where you want to go. You're going to get fired anyway. So what the hell? If you're going to get fired when you screw it up, swing for the fences.
So as GM of the Panthers, who has just traded up, right? You're sitting in that seat. You're saying, even though I like Bryce Young better, you do buy into this. Anthony Richardson's potential's higher. You're buying into that.
I wouldn't if I didn't think he was a capable quarterback in terms of reading defenses, going through a progression, working a pocket. I think he's good at that stuff. He's just inaccurate. And I think when you're that inaccurate, it probably is a mechanical problem with your motion, which we've already seen can be addressed with private coaching, with whatever. I think there's a world where Richardson can get significantly more accurate.
The athleticism that Richardson shows in the pocket makes me think it's possible. He's just really athletic. When it looks right, it's good. I'm going to I contradict myself too when people are like, this guy has good mechanics, he's just inaccurate. It's like, well, the whole point of mechanics is to be accurate and to throw with proper velocity. That's not good mechanics. But when it looks right, I could see Richardson figuring it out a little bit more. The other thing too, it's not just, as we've said, fixing the accuracy. It's the other stuff that Richardson brings to the table mitigates the lack of accuracy, right? Creates more open throws in the whole deal. So you're going Richardson.
Yeah.
Number one for the Panthers. And that puts Bryce Young at number 2. Is that right?
Yes.
For the Texans?
Yeah. At that point where you've passed on, when Richardson has been taken, you've passed on Bryce Young. For the Texans, Bryce Young is the slam dunk answer because Richardson is a home run swing. Might not work out, but I think it's the biggest payoff potential. After that, I think Bryce Young is just clearly the best quarterback prospect, so that becomes a no-brainer. Houston takes by far the best prospect.
As much as we've talked about Bryce Young at 1, and so it's pretty well divided here. The NFL always does a good job of keeping us in suspense as to who the number 1 overall pick is going to be. There are some people that think it's C.J. Stroud. There are some people that think it's Bryce Young. But there's a realistic enough chance that the Texans will have their option of Bryce Young. We'll be able to take him if they want. I would love to see Bryce Young in that offense with our friend Bobby, with the Shanahan scheme and all that stuff. I could see Bryce Young succeeding in a Shanahan tree, right?
Sure.
So this is a realistic option, even though you and I have always said, yeah, we think Bryce Young's the best quarterback. We think that's where the Panthers should lean. By the way, going back to the Richardson thing, a few weeks ago, I remember there was Thomas Davis saying he thinks there are people in the building that love Anthony Richardson and everything. I don't know if it ends up potentially happening, but technically it's still on the table. And these are Sam's picks. These are your picks right now. One thing I need to correct you on, Russell Wilson was a high-end quarterback. I don't think Russell Wilson had a limited ceiling. He hit a pretty high ceiling.
He was high-end, but there was always a feeling of there's more. He never got into that echelon of, for the period where he was at his best, it was, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. He never hit that category.
No, but that's not a height thing. That's Matt Ryan has the same thing. Like Matt Ryan never got into that category. Big Ben never got into that category.
I mean, Roethlisberger maybe got there a season or two. Matt Ryan got there in a season. How do you know it wasn't a height thing?
Because there's other quarterbacks without a height issue. Dak Prescott's never gotten there, right? It's the same.
But those are not. That's not a reason it isn't. That the fact that
it's not a reason it is.
I didn't ever say it was, but Russell Wilson has always played the game in a way that is different from all those other guys, and there has always been a feeling that there was more potential there than was realized. And for years, that was explained away as, well, the Seahawks just aren't letting Russ cook. That's the problem here. And we cycled through a bunch of offense coordinators trying to get the one that could unlock the final 5% to turn him into the quarterback that we believe he is. And then eventually that stopped happening. They got rid of him, and then he was terrible last year. So right now it looks like the limiting factor has been Russell Wilson rather than the other issues.
Yeah, maybe. We don't have time for this. Agree to disagree. That's like saying 10 years later, scouts knew Antonio Brown was a problem.
I mean,
and
I don't think it is.
Showed up 10 years into his career.
I think it's just simply saying that the limiting factor on Russell Wilson has been Russell Wilson. That part, I think, is becoming fairly inarguable. And then the question is, was it height related? And we know he's always targeted the middle of the field differently.
Yeah, there are definitely height related limitations to Russell Wilson's game. That part's fair.
Okay.
All right. What's happening now? We've got Anthony Richardson. We have Bryce Young. What's next?
So, 2 quarterbacks gone, number 1, 2. Now you have the Colts sitting there at 4. Arizona's at 3. They don't want to take they're obviously not taking a quarterback. They don't really want to sit there at 3 and take a defensive player. They want to trade back. The problem for them is the only person really interested in trading at this point was Indianapolis, who just don't want to get left with the last quarterback on the shelf, the last turkey in the shop. So the Colts are the only offer on the table. They jump up from 4 to 3 just to secure their guy. And their guy in this situation is Will Levis. Now,
Colts are coming up to get Will Levis.
Number 1, this is what I would do. But number 2, they also sent the entire farm to go watch Will Levis at his pro day. Now, you could argue that's because it's quite a short trip.
It's a short trip.
Reasonable. But they sent a lot of people to Will Levis's pro day. Kind of like you're getting the same kind of vibes that people got from Carolina at C.J. Stroud's pro day, where everyone's happy, everyone's loving life.
Better handshakes. They had better handshakes.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've had this conversation many times. I think he's a better quarterback prospect. His last season was bad. The year before that, though, with a better supporting cast and a better offense and an NFL system, that's where you started to see real NFL potential in Will Levis. And I think that situation in Indianapolis makes sense for him. So the Colts jumping up 1 spot is entirely reasonable. I mean, we've seen that several times in the past where teams have jumped 1 spot ahead just to make sure they get their guy. To be fair, the last time I can think of, it didn't go well because the Bears got Trubisky. But it happens. You know what I mean? So
the idea here, if you're the Colts, you're going to go from 4 to 3 just to make sure that a team like the Falcons, the Raiders, the Titans, who have been rumored to go to 3 in your division, you want to make sure that no one else is trading up.
Yep. You just don't want to get jumped and be left with QB4 who might not be your guy. So you jump up, and for Arizona, they'll take any deal that's on the table. And if this is the best one that's on the table, this is the one they take.
And this is in line with your QB rankings other than, the Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, those guys going out of order. But you do like, of the 2 left on the board, you do like Will Levis better than C.J. Stroud.
Yeah. So most of the time you'll see these picks fall in line with my rankings, but there are some times where I think the situation or the circumstances around it, like Carolina, makes sense to go against the rankings to shoot for greater potential or better fit in a system or whatever it is.
Risk appetite.
Yeah.
As I've
I mean,
said.
that's
different risk appetite.
Risk appetite or, scheme fit or whatever it is.
So you're going Levis at 3 now. Colts have traded up. Cardinals trade down 1. I mean, I think this is a no-brainer for the Cardinals. This is what you want. Trade down and still get Will Anderson.
I think the Cardinals would love to trade further if there was a deal on the table. If they can only get down 1 spot, they pick up an extra pick here and they still get Will Anderson. It's free money. It's a profit. So they grab Will Anderson at number 4. No-brainer. This is as simple as the Bryce Young at 2 deal. You run the card in.
So this is where it kind of like falls in line a little bit. We've talked a little bit about Arizona and Will Anderson. I think Will Anderson's the best prospect in this draft for non-quarterbacks. I think that is the safest, not only the safest play, but the best play for Arizona. And then you do something else that I think I probably did last week. Seattle Seahawks taking Jalen Carter, interior defensive lineman for Georgia. So he's going to Seattle at 5. So those back-to-back picks, those are the 2 guys along the defensive line that we've said, hey, those are the 2 best players. It's not a blue-chip heavy draft. Assuming Jalen Carter checks out ticks all the boxes off the field, you're getting the other blue chip defensive player here. If you're Seattle.
That's the thing. That's the question. Like, you can make a very good argument that Jalen Carter on a big board that's just looking at football ability is the number 1 player in this entire draft. So it's all down to your guys doing background. It's all the stuff we don't have access to. How he's doing in the meeting room. What happens when you talk to him? What are your guys giving you in background in terms of researching his entire life in Georgia? All this kind of stuff. Like, if that checks out, and who the hell knows from this seat, then you draft him. You draft him and you're happy because he's arguably the best player in the entire draft. If it doesn't, you take him off your board or you don't touch him for like a round or 2 or whatever. But these are, you have to assume at some point when you're doing a mock draft, like, I don't know, let's say it checks out.
Let's pretend it checks out. So there is a real world scenario where Jalen Carter drops. Remember Laramie Tunsil a few years back was going to go probably top 5. He's got the gas mask video, comes out right before the draft. What a crazy night that was.
Yes.
That was my first night, I think, live blogging the draft, like really getting into it. And it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
There was the Tunsil thing that broke like just before the draft. There was the Lyle Collins thing where he's all of a sudden a person of interest in a murder inquiry.
That's right.
Right before the draft. And then he slips so far.
Out of the draft.
Well, he slipped so far that his own camp, his agents are like, don't draft him now. We don't want it. Don't touch him. We will not sign for anyone that drafts us. We now want the ability to go choose our destination. I said at the time the Carter thing happened, one of the big differences between those situations and this one is the time span involved. Like, this was going to have weeks to work its way out, and he's already resolved the thing. Did you see that? I didn't even notice that until the other day. Like, he's already pled guilty to, or pled no contest, I think, to the misdemeanors, paid his fine. Like, we're done. We've already settled this legal issue. So that part has had the time. It's already worked its way through the process. Now there's other stuff in a pro day workout that was apparently crap. There's talk that he won't even talk to teams, won't go to a visit outside of the top 10 because he knows he's going in the top 10. This has not been the cleanest pre-draft
process. That part's ridiculous because it's like those teams can trade up into the top 10. Anyway, the point I was going to make is there is a realistic chance Jalen Carter is there at 10 or 15. Like, there might be teams that don't want to touch him, but in this case, you're taking him at 5 for the Seattle Seahawks. I meant to follow up and say, what's it like? So when you were the GM of the Colts a couple picks ago, what's it like working for Jim Irsay? What was your interview like? How'd you secure the seat with Jim?
I whooped his ass on Madden. It was great fun.
Yeah.
12-hour Madden session. Just owned him.
Just franchise mode? You just talk about just go through all your offseason moves?
Well, as we said, he plays the 2004 Colts.
Oh, yeah.
I got stuck with the current roster.
If it's 04, you should grab Vic. You got to grab 04 Vic. Play with him, just run around and cheat the game, man. That's what the kids did back then. Anyway, we're up to pick number 6.
Flying.
So we are. Detroit Lions are on the clock, Sam.
Yeah, you'd think. Not in this
I
mock.
would think that's who has the pick.
Yeah.
At number 6.
Not in my mock, sir.
What has happened?
Well,
what's going on?
With 3 quarterbacks off the board and with the surprise of C.J. Stroud being the guy to fall as opposed to being taken number 1 overall, all of a sudden QB-needy teams are interested. And one particular QB-needy team, the Tennessee Titans, decides to put a package together, jump from number 11 all the way to number 6. Detroit is only too happy to trade down at this spot. And the Tennessee Titans draft C.J. Stroud as their quarterback in the future.
Wow. Did you put the package together? Did you? Or did you just,
I did.
Know what happens?
I don't remember 100% what it was. But
so Tennessee's at 11.
So what I did is when I made these trades, I used a couple of different charts. I made sure that they checked out and put them together, and then didn't record them.
I trust you.
Because people will whinge. People will complain. Whatever it is.
That'll never happen.
The trade is unreasonable. This is way too much. This is way too little. So I just kind of made sure it was feasible, and then decided to keep it behind closed doors under wraps.
The people who whinge, your words, at mock drafts, do they do the same thing on draft night?
Probably.
Because on draft night,
this would never happen.
Draft night looks like the worst mock ever. Like, I never expected this guy to go to 10. This guy will never go at 10. Yeah. I can't wait. We're going to do our draft bets show. Should we do that? Do you want to do that tomorrow?
Yeah. Do that. Yes.
Okay, so tomorrow we'll tweet. We got to do a lot of social mediaing here to make sure people are ready.
Well,
buy us some extra time for evals.
Eli's on the case already.
Tell the people we're going to take all of your draft bets, but the draft bets need to be very definitive. Not like this guy's definitely not going to the Bengals or something like that. You know what I mean?
And in particular,
it's got to be this guy will not drop out of the top 10. This guy's definitely going in the top 10. This guy's definitely a first rounder. This guy's not. Whatever it is.
And the best of these, remember, are things to call us out for being crazy about certain things, right? Like the Tyree Wilson thing. And
I'm willing to change this a little bit. So I think it's not so much what do we feel strongly about, because we're not into predicting the draft.
Right.
I'm willing to just take strong stances, even if I agree with them. Like if someone's like, hey, I'm with you guys, Tyree Wilson is falling out of the top 15, I might say, you put your name on the line, I'm in agreement. It's not so much a bet, it's like, we'll put a PFF plus on the line for that person that takes a strong stance.
Yeah.
Strong stances that come true on draft night.
Contact us. NFLpodcast@pff.com is the email to send in. We have a spreadsheet already that we can, I think, duplicate and create the draft version of it. What your strong takes for the draft, things that would never happen or things that will absolutely happen. Throw out the bets. We will select the best ones on tomorrow's show. And then we'll all have a little bit of skin in the game.
All right, so we just did our cornerback rankings.
I do like the imagery, by the way, though, of these people just sitting there what's the doon trade, whatever is trade, and people just screaming at the TV. That would never happen.
That would never happen.
It's literally happening right
never.
now. It's in front of you. It's occurring.
Lance Zierlein, you idiot. That'll never happen on draft night. Come on. All right, so the Titans trade up.
Yeah.
From 11 to 6. Mm-hmm. For C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, so
so you like Stroud now?
There's 3 trades in this draft. Spoiler alert, one of them's upcoming. But there are 3 trades, and they're all, I think, opportunistic trades, which I think is where you're going to see the ones on draft night take place. They're not necessarily pre-planned. We're going to jump from here to here to get this to happen. It's the draft is unfolding in a certain way that wasn't necessarily anticipated, and that's what's going to spur action. So for Tennessee, I don't think they would have had any realistic expectation heading into this that C.J. Stroud would be there available as low as 6. And if that's their guy, boom, they're gonna jump. So Tennessee's jumping up to 6 to grab C.J. Stroud.
So if you're Detroit, you're obviously adding a few extra picks. We just mentioned in our mind, I think you and I both agree, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter. We'll call those blue chip defensive players. You and I both have Devin Witherspoon as our top corner. Mm-hmm. Just had our cornerback rankings show last week.
I'm actually, by the way, I'm willing to push him into that conversation of blue chip. I think Witherspoon is now, along with Anderson and Carter, a blue chip defensive prospect.
Okay, so we're talking about 3 blue chips and 4 quarterbacks, right? Like that's like your top 7.
And a blue chip running back, which doesn't count the same.
No, it doesn't. No other blue chip offensive players, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're Detroit, you're going through this, right? You're willing to take those extra picks. You're okay with the drop-off because Devin Witherspoon would be a great pick. We've all mocked him to Detroit at 6.
Yeah.
You're willing to give up Devin Witherspoon, drop down to 11. Maybe it's the other corners or whoever else you're looking at 11. You're okay to give that up. There's going to be extra picks involved. I'm assuming it's like a second or a third, right?
I think
Tennessee.
They picked up a couple of extra picks here.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Definitely a second. There's another pick involved as well. They get a reasonable haul to make this happen. I think because of that, you're not loving the value to at 6 for a corner, Devin Witherspoon at 6, though I think it's fine. I think you're willing to give that up and play the board, like just see how things work. The work you did in free agency means you don't need to chase that value and go, no, we have to get our guy here at 6. You can wait. And if you can wait and pick up extra picks along the way, perfect.
Well done by the Lions. I mean, you did a great job with the Lions here in this draft.
Oh, people are going to hate it. Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see when we get there. Now, so that's from a Lions perspective. From a Titans perspective, moving from 11 to 6, we've talked a little bit on our show about maybe it's overhaul time, right? It's kind of like let's reset this roster. They did elements of that this offseason. Taylor Lewan's been released, and Robert Woods, and they're starting to reset. Ben Jones.
They've had their finger hovering over the reset button for the whole offseason. It's like, do I push it? They hit it. They mashed the button with this pick, like this trade. They finally go, oh, look, C.J. Stroud's available. Bam, hammer on the reset button. This is the franchise reset that happens. Then they start making some more moves. They probably try and trade away a couple of guys, but they finally mash the reset button with this move.
So they're willing to give up those extra picks in a rebuild situation to go get their quarterback. They're going to get C.J. Stroud. And as the Titans GM that you've just stepped in, as the Titans GM, you're like, of course. I watched the Georgia game. I'm in on C.J. Stroud. He's the guy for Tennessee. What are we going to try to trade Ryan Tannehill here? See what
trade or release?
The market looks like.
I mean, at this point everything's available on the roster. You know, we're going to identify a couple of key spots that we need to keep intact for the future, and so that the quarterback has somebody to throw to. But after that, everything's available.
All right. How do you feel about Stroud? He's QB4 here. Give people the Cliff Notes versions on Stroud. Your thoughts on him? I have him kind of tied with Anthony Richardson as my 2A, 2B in my quarterback rankings. You have Stroud lower. Why is that? But why do you still have him as a guy that you would take in the top 6?
I still don't love him, but I'm warming to Stroud the longer the process goes. I still have huge concerns about his play under pressure, his play outside of structure, the fact that offense doesn't ask him to do a whole lot relative to some other guys. There's a lot of issues, I think, with his game, all of which were answered in the Georgia game, but one game, you know? And other people will weigh that game really highly. I tend to weigh the bigger sample size more highly, particularly when the deficiencies in the large sample size come against weaker opposition. That, to me, is almost more instructive than the good coming against the best opposition. So I have concerns. But he's incredibly accurate. I think he is smart and can read a defense. I think the athleticism has been underplayed, actually, in the process. And within this Titans offense, they might lean on that a lot more early in his career. And actually, you can kind of prop him up a little while we figure out if he can develop as a passing quarterback and be the full breadth of what he needs to be. So I don't love him as a prospect, but I am warming to his ability the further we go. And I think for Tennessee, at this point, you know, pick a number 11 to start with. You get up to 6. I think it's worth doing.
All right, so there's a big move in the draft. Titans move up to number 6. Lions move down. We'll get to their pick in a minute. But the Raiders are now on the clock at 7. Where are you going with the Raiders? All 4 quarterbacks off the board. I know if you were Raiders GM, you'd be looking at quarterback. You're not a Jimmy Garoppolo believer. But at the same time, you just signed him, right? So,
yeah, and by the way, the reason I would do this as opposed to Tennessee will do that is I don't think the Titans are going to be bad enough next year to be in with a shot of Caleb Williams, Drake May. Like, this is as close as they're going to get to finding the next franchise quarterback in this, like, will we, won't we reset type of mode. I think this is the chance that they didn't really think they had a shot at. So I don't love Stroud, but if he falls to 6 in your Tennessee, I'm willing to take that shot and go get him and hope that that is good enough for the reset.
And that puts the Raiders on the clock at number 7. Where are you going with the Raiders here?
So the Raiders, I was convinced by your argument that they are less desperate for a quarterback since they have Jimmy Garoppolo and the 11 games of a healthy Jimmy G they're going to get this year.
Wow.
So they're not as desperate as some of these other teams that might have moved. They're going to stay there. To which point I take the blue chip, and there's one left on the defensive side, you know, since the running back doesn't count. Devin Witherspoon. I have been convinced with his 4.40 at his pro day that he is in the category of blue chip defensive playmaker. He might not be as good as Sauce Gardner, but he's pretty close.
So you're going Witherspoon here for the Raiders. I like that. I mean, I think if the Raiders are going to be out at quarterback, they're going to be an interesting team for if Witherspoon is available there, or on the Jalen Carter drop, right? If Jalen Carter drops, the Raiders just need so much talent on the defensive side of the ball. Remember a couple years ago when Mike Mayock got in there and John Gruden got in there? It was like year 2, and they said, we need playmakers on defense. They still do.
Yeah.
Years later, they still need playmakers on defense other than Max Crosby.
It's because they missed on basically every first-round draft pick they had.
Yeah, so I mean, they're still in that same boat where the Raiders. I think they can run just their offense can run perfectly fine, right? They've got playmakers.
That offense looks like
receivers.
It will be,
They have Garoppolo now, Josh McDaniels. They have what should be a decent offense. Their whole defense, other than Max Crosby, is up in the air. There's a couple players here and there, but I mean, it's really up in the air. So adding Devin Witherspoon would be great. I think they'll consider the Jalen Carter stuff if he drops. So I like this for the Raiders. I think this is not best case scenario, but pretty close, I think, for the Raiders to get the top cornerback here at 7.
Yeah, the Raiders' offense, I think, could actually be pretty decent. I like the playmakers that they have. I like the overall. I think the offensive line is solid. If Jimmy G stays healthy, then it could be good. Their defense is a mess. Like that, they need everything. I mean, they're one of the worst defenses from a personnel standpoint in the NFL. So anything you can add to the defense, I think, makes sense. And as I said, Witherspoon, I think, is in this blue chip category of player. That guy allowed a passer rating last season of 25. And just, I mean, we talked about it in our cornerback ranking show, which you should go back and listen to if you haven't. His ability to read the game and be a step ahead of everything is wild for a cornerback.
Man, I kind of like this for the Raiders.
Yeah.
I like that move, and it's all because 4 quarterbacks go in the top 6. I am curious on draft night if that does actually happen. This is crazy. It'll never happen. Will there actually be 4 quarterbacks that go? I tend to believe maybe it's 3 and somebody drops.
It is. Because we talked ourselves into this a couple of times in the past. Like, quarterbacks always get pushed up, and then sometimes it doesn't happen. And there's definitely a scenario, multiple in fact, where 3 quarterbacks go in the top 4, where they go 1, 2, 3, 4. Like it's easily doable. But if I don't love C.J. Stroud and other people don't love Will Levis and some people are not going to love Bryce Young's size, like it also feels easy to imagine 2 of them slipping.
Here's why I think quarterbacks could slip. I don't think people treat the quarterback position the way we discuss it, right? Because we've talked about the Raiders who just signed Jimmy Garoppolo as a QB-needy team. But I don't know if they view that of themselves. I don't know if the Falcons really view themselves as a QB-needy team. Are they really convincing themselves, of course we have to give Desmond Ridder 1 more year. We have to give him a shot, right? Are the Commanders actually thinking, of course we have to give Sam Howell a proper shot. We would never trade up from 15 to go get QB 3 or 4. We already have Sam Howell. So I don't think the teams view themselves as QB needy, even though you and I and a lot of people at PFF say if you don't have a top 8 guy, you're always QB needy. You should always be. I don't know if the Lions think that they really need a quarterback. They have Jared Goff, right? Where we would say, hey, you've got 2 first-round picks. Maybe use one of those on a quarterback and look to the future and, take that swing while you have Goff as a bridge. So that's where I think when it comes down to draft night, there are 3 teams at the top who legitimately need a quarterback at 2, right, 2, 4, 2 and 4. Like there's 2, and then I don't know beyond that.
Well, I also think that
1, 2, and 4 all need a quarterback. There's your 3. There's a chance that the 4th quarterback does drop.
I also think that we tend to view it as if you need a quarterback, you need to take one, even if you have no confidence that guy can be the guy, right? So my pick of Richardson at number 1 was the ceiling he has of being a true franchise quarterback, home run hit, unique dude that can be amazing. And then Bryce Young, I think, is the next guy that has the best shot of doing that based off complete opposite traits, but those kinds of things. Do I think that there's a world where Will Levis or C.J. Stroud can become an elite NFL quarterback? Probably not. So if you don't think there's a chance that those guys can be that, then why would you take them at all? So I think there's a lot of NFL teams view it through that lens of Does this guy have, like, that grading system you always see? You know, this guy's a 6.3. There's these abstract numbers between 1 and 10 somewhere, or 1 and 7, or whatever it is. Weird scale. But they sort of specifically explain those as, you know, high-end starter, capable starter, backup, whatever. You're not going to have a high-end grade on a couple of these guys. And if you don't think that they fit that category, then you're just, in their world, burning a draft pick. Like, we're just setting fire to this draft pick for a guy whose ceiling is marginal NFL starter. Why would we do that?
When the reality of it is, even if you think C.J. Stroud is a low-end starter,
like
good starter.
The 10% chance that you're wrong, and he's on.
There's a percentage chance that he becomes elite. There's a percentage chance that he becomes a full-on bust, right? And you're playing and that's what people are weighing, right? And I don't know if they're actually weighing that, but that's what they should be weighing.
But
right?
I think that's probably why you see quarterback slip sometimes. Is that teams work in this sort of absolute of, we simply don't believe there's a chance that this guy is good enough that it makes sense. Whereas we would argue, well, look, if you don't have a quarterback, take the swing. Like, what have you got to lose?
It doesn't matter if you get a starting tackle or guard anyway. And the Falcons are up on the clock here at number 8, and they're probably going to take a tackle or a guard here because I can read your mock draft at pff.com.
Oh, yeah. This is the first pick, actually, that I hated the spot. Like, if you're Atlanta now and the draft is falling this way, and you're sitting there at 8, and you need defense, no, I hate it. Because all my 3 blue-chip defenders, Anderson, Jalen Carter, Witherspoon, they're gone. I don't love any of the other defenders enough that I'm like number 8 overall. There's a couple of guys that I really liked, and I'm like, God, 8 feels rich. Or 8 feels rich, and the Falcons have kind of addressed that need already a little bit. You know, like Kalijah Kancey I thought about, and then I'm like, Kancey in addition to Onyemata, who they brought in free agency, in addition to Grady Jarrett, like that's a lot of similar style defensive linemen. Do they even function together? I love Brian Branch, and you know when we talked about him in the quote-unquote cornerback rankings, like I think he can play all positions in a defense. But I also sort of compared him to Minkah Fitzpatrick, who got that billing coming out, who ran 2/10 almost faster in the 40, and Minkah went 11. No, okay, it doesn't work that way, right? Drafts are different. It's just maybe a weaker draft, but that was gnawing at me. I'm like, can I really put Brian Branch at 8 when Minkah went 11, and he's slower, and it's like,
And a couple Falcons fans got mad at me when I gave them Brian Branch because they love Richie Grant.
I like that fit. I do like the fit, but I couldn't do it at 8. So in the end, I was like, you know what? We're going to bring in Peter Skoronski. I know we just signed up one guard long term. We brought Caleb and Gary back. Maybe his future is a tackle long term, but I'm pretty sure I can plug him in right away at guard, and he's going to be really, really good. And if I can't do anything else on defense, let's make like one of these insane offenses where the offensive line is a beast. Like, let's give whoever the hell our quarterback is, Desmond Ridder or whatever else, the best chance to succeed possible. So I don't like it, but I went with Skoronski as the best option.
So he's going to slot in at guard for you?
Yes, left guard.
So it is interesting the way you just worded that, right? I mean, we have axioms here that we tend to believe. Creep back toward average. We have on the offensive line. We have shirts that even say that. It is interesting though because there's not one clean way of doing things. It's not that there's no advantage having an elite offensive line. It's just not as great as having, say, an elite receiver core, right? If you had to be elite in one spot, I would choose the receiver or my pass catchers over the offensive line. But if you're close to an elite offensive line, it might be an interesting thing to strive for, especially if you do have a Desmond Ridder at quarterback, right? A question mark. Where can you find advantages that other teams don't have? Could be an angle that the Falcons take here.
And this, by the way, is a classic example of this is where being the GM for all 32 teams comes back to bite you. Because if I was just Atlanta's GM, it's like, oh, trade out of this spot, hate it. But
yeah, of course.
Somebody's got to want to get in there, and you have the same problems. Now, maybe somebody else would be more inclined to bring in Kalijah Kancey at 8, but to the point where they trade up, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's really – I think if the draft falls like this, we've talked about the pivot points in the draft being 7, 8, whatever it is. Every year it's 7 or 8. Could be 10 or 11 in a deep draft. But once you hit that pivot point, it's tough to trade out. If you want to,
right? You
would say, I would love to pick at 13 or 14 and feel pretty good about that player.
But the reason you want out is the reason nobody else wants to trade in.
Yeah, so the same thing. Skoronski at 8, you'd rather have him at 12, 13, or 14 if you're the Falcons, but you get him at 8. That puts the Bears up on the clock at 9. Skoronski was a pretty common pick for the Bears, at least for me and for others. So where are you going with the Bears here at 9?
Yeah, Skoronski's gone. I don't love the next offensive line options for them. I don't think that they make a ton of sense. You know, you're going to see, if you're following along on the PFF, the mock draft simulator or our big board, Tyree Wilson is a name that's going to be up here for a while. He's around. You know, you could have your pick of the wide receivers. I think Kalijah Kancey on this defensive line, though, is the pick. Like, D-line is still a huge need for the Bears. I think Kancey is the best available defensive lineman. I love what he can do, even if he becomes, even if he remains or is always a one-dimensional player. I think that one dimension is so valuable, and he's really good at it. I think Kancey is worth a top 10 draft pick.
The next Tommy Harris here?
The next Tommy Harris.
For the Bears?
What a throwback.
Little Tommy Harris comp?
Don't hate it.
What year did he get drafted? Was he like 04, 03, 04?
Yeah.
I love watching old drafts around this time. I got to go back to my
Tommy
04
Harris,
draft.
Junior now. You know how old he is?
41.
No, he's younger than we are.
37.
39.
39.
2004, yeah.
So 04 draft.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I haven't worked my way through the entire 04 draft. I can't wait to hear what they say about Tommy Harris when I get there.
The Eli Manning, Robert Gallery.
Disruptor. Robert Gallery, yeah, so I did get to that part of the draft. Robert Gallery, 10-year starter, safest player in the draft.
Sean Andrews.
Where'd he go?
2 picks behind, 16.
16. Where did Harris go?
14.
At 14. So there you go. Next,
good draft.
Who's the other guy? Oh, Henry Melton was the other guy that the Bears had. Former running back Henry Melton turned undersized defensive tackle that became an interior disruptor for the Bears.
That was a good draft, 2004. Igor Olshansky.
Was he in the first?
No, second.
Yeah. Chargers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
San Diego Chargers.
San Diego Chargers. So much drama there. Eli Manning was just like, I'm not going to the Chargers.
Not
doing it. I don't know why. He was very upset. Anyway, Kalijah Kancey going to the Bears at 9 to be the next Tommy Harris. Yes, Ed Oliver is probably the more reasonable comp here.
I love Kancey. Yeah, Ed Oliver is a better comp, and even Ed Oliver's not a great comp either because they're like the opposite player. They're very physically they're the same effectively, but Ed Oliver was not a good pass rusher in college. Kancey is an excellent pass rusher.
We explained a little bit of that away, though, right? Ed Oliver was used as a zero tech, nose tackle.
But it might have just been because he wasn't great at it.
It could be. That is one of those things, right? When you say, hey, the college didn't use this player well,
right?
Is it because
there might be a
they
reason
just
for that?
Square peg, round hole, you know, they just put him in the wrong spot, or they were like, actually, you're not as good as you should be at this particular
And the thing,
thing.
so Kancey's problem relative to other small defensive tackles is the dude has like legit T-Rex stumpy little arms, right? Which I would care more about if there was evidence of them problematically stopping his pass rush moves, but there isn't. Like, in fact, he's way ahead of the curve in terms of using his hands to defeat blocks. He's not Aaron Donald at that, who was like peerless, but he's better than most people, and he's better than most defensive tackles with significantly longer arms. Like, he uses that jump cut extremely well. He's able to get past these guys that have much longer arms than him. He doesn't very often let those guys into his pads, so I don't really care that his arms are short, and even short relative to some of these other smaller guys, Ed Oliver or Aaron Donald that we're talking about. The tape shows that guy is going to be a really impactful, disruptive interior pass rusher, and the Bears are crying out for one of those.
Oh, man. Kancey's interesting, man, because Donald fell to 13 back in 2014. 13 or 14.
Yeah.
That was he should have obviously gone top 5. People knew that. They were scared of his height.
Yeah.
A few years later, Ed Oliver did buck that trend. Ed Oliver's been okay. He's been pretty good. I don't know if the NFL is as keen for the 280-pound, the 6-foot, 280-pound defensive tackle. I don't know if the NFL wants Kalijah Kancey in the top 10. I don't know if they're going to put him there. Mm-hmm. I've seen him, I think, I tried not to look at too much other stuff to get swayed, but I see him in the 20s a lot. So we might end up being higher on Kancey. But, of course, as I mentioned, Mel Kiper was the first one to put him at the top 10, so who knows.
And it's also, we're in this world, we've reached the point in the draft now where, I hated this spot for Atlanta pick before. You're in this spot now where you're going to have to take somebody. Like, you might not love it. You might not think this is the best fit, but like, what are your alternatives? Give me a better option here. Now, you might argue one, but I don't think that there's a better option for Chicago than Elijah Cansey, which is obviously why I drafted him here.
My quick point here. This is also the point in the draft. We saw Minnesota trade from 12 last year to 30. This is where some really analytically inclined teams are looking at the draft. They're factoring in contract value and everything and saying the drop-off from players, just on-field performance, between 10 and 30 is not all that drastic in certain drafts. In other drafts, I think they might be saying, hey, you can get Micah Parsons here, right? It might be worth it in the top 10.
Yeah. And
but
again,
this feels like one of those drafts where the drop-off between 12 and 30 is not drastic. And when you factor in the contract value and how much more you're paying, there's a lot of teams that are going to want to trade down here.
Yes.
I don't know if there's going to be trade partners to come up, but there's always a couple teams, right? There's always a Saints. There's always a team that likes to be really aggressive. So I think if we were GMs here, we'd be absolutely looking to make a trade down.
The next half a dozen teams in the next 10 or whatever are going to be looking to trade back, but you're going to need a trade partner for that to happen, and I never found one.
You never found one because you're the other GMs.
Right.
Eagles at 10. Everybody's giving them defensive line. Where are you going here?
I went with your guy, Brian Branch.
I haven't seen this yet, and I love it. I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's out, and Brian, right?
Yeah.
He's out. Yeah, he's in Detroit. Brian Branch in as a replacement?
It wouldn't take a lot for you to convince me that Brian Branch belongs in the blue chip conversation of defensive players. If he ran, a tenth of a second faster in the 40, which sounds stupid, but maybe matters. If he ran just a little bit faster, I think I'd be sold. But that guy is good at everything. He technically played the slot, but it's this weird role that doesn't really exist in the NFL. But the closest it came to existing is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who the Eagles had. Now, they moved him from the slot to safety a little bit. But the point being, Branch just brings that kind of versatility and true versatility of being able to do them both well as opposed to just doing them badly in different spots. This is a team that expects to be playing in February. And in February, you might need to move a defensive back from corner to safety or back again or somebody to the slot that isn't supposed to be there, whatever. Brian Branch being added to your secondary gives you a lot of options, gives you a lot of plans, B, C, D, and E. And that's, I think, very valuable for a team that expects to be playing at the sharp end of the season.
Before, people tell me Howie would never do this. Howie only takes the big boys in the first round. And there's a historical precedent there. Howie Roseman's going to took Jordan Davis last year, defensive tackle. He takes offensive linemen. He takes edge defenders. This would be a little bit different going to the defensive backfield for the Eagles. But I think to your point, slot and safety are both needs for the Eagles. Branch could legitimately fill both, not at the same time, but you play Tyrann Mathieu style, right? Tyrann Mathieu plays free safety on early downs, steps up and covers the slot on late downs as a zone-heavy team like Philadelphia is. Branch's instincts and all that stuff are just unbelievable. Tackling, he's good, man. Yep. I would take Brian Branch in the top 10, absolutely, and I like this pick for the Eagles. I
really do. I think he's, as I say, it wouldn't take much for you to convince me that he belongs in that blue chip conversation as well. He is so good at pretty much everything. I genuinely think he would hold up fine playing every single position in your secondary. So for a team that already has a pretty good secondary and really just needs to build in contingency, I think that's huge.
All right, so now the Lions are back up at pick 11.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Lions doing after trading down?
So again, I didn't love this spot, but I think there's enough options that they can use it as opposed to trading back again. And same thing, who are you going to go with trade partner-wise if you do trade back? I think they grab a corner here. I think the value is there. We did our cornerback rankings. I love Joey Porter Jr. as the second best cornerback in this draft. And so, he's obviously talked about as the best press man corner in the league, which sends him to teams like Pittsburgh, to teams like New England. I think he's going to be good playing zone coverage as well. I don't think we're talking about a scheme-specific player here, but I think that upside that he brings as that guy, if he develops as a zone corner, could be amazing. And the Lions have the flexibility now that they don't need him to be amazing right away. Like they brought in Emmanuel Mosley, who can survive a year on the outside. They brought in plenty of help. I think that's a great gamble to take for Detroit.
So ultimately, going back, even if you love Devin Witherspoon, which you do, right? You're in the war room, you're in the draft room here. It's pick 6. I love Devin Witherspoon. I believe you, right? There's a drop off between Devin Witherspoon and Joey Porter Jr. and some of the other corners, but you're willing to take that risk because you'll get 2 or 3 other picks, right? You'll get 2 or 3 other players later in the draft, which, by the way, I would love to be drafting. Like, I do a lot of Rams mock drafts just to play around with it. They have so many picks. They have like 6 picks in like a 15-pick stretch in the hundreds where there's a bunch of players that I kind of like in that range. This feels like one of those drafts where more picks in the 100 to 200 range, you should be able to find some players maybe and not feel better about them than the higher picks, but the higher picks don't have as much confidence level maybe as they should. So I love the process for the Lions if this works out. Trade down. Now they're at 11. Take Joey Porter Jr., and we'll talk about their corners more because they're going to pick again later in the draft.
Yeah, I really think that this has a huge home run potential. His numbers were good, not great last season, depending on what you looked at. Like his passer rating given up was 63, something like that. But he didn't give up a touchdown all season. And after that first game against Purdue and Charlie Jones, teams basically stopped throwing the ball in his direction, like at all. He had 14 targets against Purdue in week 1, and then 16 for the remainder of the season.
That's
combined.
Crazy, Joey Porter.
And
that's crazy.
In the first game, the Purdue game, 14 targets. He gave up 6 catches for 66 yards and had 5 pass breakups. So 5 of the 14 passes thrown his way, he broke up. And I don't know if that spurred the rest of the college football landscape to go, you know what, let's maybe stop throwing the ball at Joey Porter. But he had one other game where he had more than 2 targets, and in that game he allowed 1 catch for 5 yards and had 2 pass breakups. So he was basically shut down last season. Now, I think immediately he's going to be a good man cover corner, but I think his zone skills are definitely there. And if that part of him develops, like, he could be a real home run hit at corner.
All right, man, that puts the Texans on the clock at 12. Remember, this is the Cleveland Browns pick, the one they got for Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
Texans at 12. This could be a best-case scenario. This could be the very best-case scenario for the Houston Texans.
So here's where I went against my own rankings, but what I think more people would do for reasons I'll explain. I went with Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver from Ohio State. He's my wide receiver 2 overall. He's most people's wide receiver 1. The reason I think he's the pick, though, if I'm Houston at this spot, is I got my quarterback. I need the biggest upgrade I can get possible at wide receiver, and I need the certainty of that because I need somebody for Bryce Young to throw to so that he does, like, I don't waste his first year, potentially ingrain bad habits. Like, I just need the safest, biggest jump at that position. I think Jordan Addison is the best wide receiver in the draft. There's also more about Addison that scares me than there is about Smith-Njigba. Like, the only concern with Smith-Njigba is he limited to like a slot-only role at the next level? Can he play outside? Is he just this slot receiver, blah, blah, blah? But you know he's going to be good. Like, you know, the degree of certainty with which we can say that Smith-Njigba will be a good NFL wide receiver is very high. Obviously, you know, in this world of nobody knows anything, but it's high, right? The Addison thing, I think the risk is higher. Maybe he can do more, but he's also 170-something pounds who ran like a 4.49. Like, these are just enough things to start to be worried about, where if you're sort of chasing, it's like the distribution curves, you know? It's the degree of certainty versus how good we think he can be. I still like Addison. I think there's a lot there, but I'm just a little bit more worried about what he brings. So for Houston specifically, who needs it now, like, doesn't need it, you know, down the line. I need it now. I need it to work right away. I think Smith-Njigba is safer.
So you're not chasing the fat tail?
No, never would.
As they say. I mean, sometimes you chase the fat tail at number 1 with the Panthers, Anthony Richardson. Now what's the opposite of the fat tail? The fat middle?
Thin middle?
Fat middle of the distribution. I mean, you almost sounded like you talked yourself into Smith and Jigba as the best receiver in the draft over Addison.
No, I think Addison I still like what he brings to the table more. I'm just more scared by it. Like, I think he has a higher bust potential than Smith and Jigba.
Therefore, a higher ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Maybe even a higher baseline, but I just think that the part that terrifies you, which is what if he stinks, is higher.
Yeah. No, that's all fair. I would absolutely love this for the Texans. I had Bryce Young as my top quarterback, as did you, and I had Jackson Smith and Jigba as my number one receiver. You just said he was your second. If the Texans came out of this draft with, again, from my perspective, the guy I think is the best quarterback and the best receiver with 2 picks in the top 12, taking that all day. Taking that all day. So I love this for the Texans. I do think it's a potential reality situation, right?
Yeah.
That the Texans, this could be where it lands. They could get Bryce Young at 2, and they could get Jackson Smith and Jigba as the top receiver off the board here at 12.
Did you hear my comp, by the way, for Addison in the show with Renner?
I don't think so. I think I tuned in later than that. Sorry.
Isaac Bruce.
Oh, I did hear that. Yeah.
Which it turns out, according to Renner, they're exactly the same size.
Yeah.
And they ran similar 40 times. Isaac Bruce is like a 4.5 guy.
Yeah, I'm not going to remind you that you've used the Isaac Bruce comp before.
Who did I use it before?
Yeah.
Who?
Rashard Higgins.
Higgins. Yeah.
Just
say
saying.
he's going to be as good as Isaac Bruce. I'm just saying stylistically that makes sense.
Yeah, Isaac Bruce was awesome, man. He was really good. Nothing against Kurt Warner or anything like that, but when we talk all about like get as many good receivers as possible, I feel like this was, before I had numbers to actually study, I felt like this was just ingrained in me, right? Like you're watching the Vikings with Jake Reed and Chris Carter and they just add Randy Moss. It's like, oh, that's why your offense is great. And then the Rams have Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and a legitimate deep threat number 3. It was easy for me as a young football fan to be convinced that's the way to win, man. That's the way to win.
The reason, though, that I think that I like that comp is that the things that everybody's scared about with Addison were also exactly like they're the reason. That's Isaac Bruce is the reason it doesn't matter because he's good at the same things. He's good at route running. He understands defenses. He knows how to get open. And then it doesn't even matter if he won't take a hit. He'll go down like a sack of potatoes after the first down. Like that. That's why I don't care. Like he can run his 4.5. He can be 170-something pounds. He can not be the fastest guy in the world, but he's going to be open, and that's the important part.
Just get open. That is the most important part. All right, man. I think we're making good time. We're about an hour in after intro and all that stuff, and we're sitting here at pick 13.
Easy.
Well done. Jets are on the clock here at pick 13. Where are you going?
Offensive line. I think this is where it starts to become value. This is where I think it just makes too much sense. So the Jets are snagging Paris Johnson Jr. I think the offensive tackle class is very tightly bunched, and you could probably sell yourself on a bunch of different players going a couple of different directions. Paris Johnson Jr., that's the one I went for. I think it makes sense for them.
Yeah, I think this has become a pretty common pick that we've seen. I think it's also worth highlighting where players are in the consensus board. Again, full admission, last week, forgot how the mock draft simulator works. It's always the PFF board being shown, but when you use the public board, that's just for mock drafting purposes when the computer picks. The couple people on the consensus board that are not being selected by you right now: Christian Gonzalez, cornerback from Oregon. He's 6 on the consensus board. Tyree Wilson is 7 on the consensus board from Texas Tech. So while you're saying there's 3 blue-chip defensive players, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Devin Witherspoon, the consensus board has those 2 guys, Christian Gonzalez, Tyree Wilson, higher than Witherspoon. Paris Johnson's number 10 on the consensus board. He goes right now 13 to the Jets. Competes at right tackle, eventually takes over at left tackle if they have to move on from Mekhi Becton. I think that all makes sense for the Jets. But do you have any explanation? People will know, but why Christian Gonzalez or Tyree Wilson are not off the board yet?
Tyree Wilson, I don't like him as a prospect at all. He scares me a lot, and we talked about this before. You in the model, you gave him Trayvon Walker's athletic profile and still couldn't make him into a above average, bust potential type of player. The production profile just isn't there. It really isn't. I know he had a bunch of sacks, but if you look at pressure rate, if you look at pass rush win rate, if you look at PFF pass rushing grade, which factors in sort of decisiveness of the win, all this kind of stuff, you can't make a tremendously good case that he's an impact edge rusher.
And Wilson he had one good year with a good pass rush win rate, but it's only one good year. In year 5,
That's good, not great.
And a lot of the Tyree Wilson type prospects that he gets compared to, like Rashawn Gary wasn't productive, but he was a great athlete, and Trayvon Walker, those guys are also younger and didn't have the opportunity.
We also, by the way, don't know how athletic he is because he hasn't worked out yet. He's going to have his own individual pro day at some point. But
that's the one, man. So I know like Lance Zierlein is pretty plugged in and talks to a lot of people, and he's put Tyree Wilson the other way, higher rather than lower. And Daniel Jeremiah has had mock drafts where he put Tyree Wilson above Will Anderson.
Yeah.
Plugged in. I think my bold take when we do our draft show tomorrow, draft bets, is going to be because Tyree Wilson hasn't worked out, I think that level of uncertainty, even though you've got junior days and all that stuff, that level of uncertainty, teams might shy away from him.
Because who hasn't worked out?
Tyree Wilson. Didn't I say?
Oh, worked out as in
because he hasn't
put up athletic numbers.
It doesn't have testing numbers.
Yes.
You're
Gotcha.
right. Not because he hasn't panned out.
Yeah.
Yes. Because he has not had official workout numbers, right? When you're in the draft room talking about Trayvon Walker, you put the workout numbers up there and you say, we've never seen this before. With Tyree Wilson, they know his arm length. They might have some testing numbers from previous years and all. They can estimate them. You've got on-field athleticism and all that stuff. But I feel like ultimately I'm going to make a bet that he's going to drop.
I mean, I think he will work out, but like you're going to need those numbers, and they're going to need to be pretty special for you to convince anybody that he should go that high.
He's not going to test before the draft.
I think he is. I think he's talking about having an individual pro day.
Coming off the foot injury and everything,
Yeah.
We'll see.
But my point being, I think you need that. I don't think you can make the case otherwise that he belongs to be particularly high in this draft if you can't point to him and say this guy's an absolute freak show of an athlete. Like I think he has a worse profile than somebody like Miles Murphy, who has worked out and shown pretty impressive workout numbers at that size. Like I don't know. I don't quite get the Tyree Wilson thing. So he's falling, and maybe falling for a while.
All right, so that puts the Patriots up on the board at number 14. Where are you going with the Patriots here at 14?
Yeah, interesting spot. A lot of people have been giving them Joey Porter Jr. He went a few picks before to the Detroit Lions. I still think, though, they're probably invested in the corner position if they can. I think Deonte Banks might have the second best chops in terms of man cover skills in this draft class. Like just his athleticism, his ability to move with people, his ability to move, period. I think he's got real man cover skills and fits this idea of New England probably wanting to go back in that direction.
Yeah, so Banks is interesting, man. He's my own like polarizing prospect. We talk about polarizing prospects where different people have different opinions.
Yeah.
Steve's brain over here is polarizing on Deonte Banks because he's an unbelievable athlete that shows up on the field. And I think this would be an interesting pick for New England if you're talking about you have to win your division, right? Who do you compete with in your division? Deonte Banks, who runs a 4.35, having to cover, say, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill from Miami, having to cover Garrett Wilson from the Jets, having to cover Stephon Diggs for the Bills. Is Deonte Banks the highest, quote-unquote, upside play to cover those types of receivers, right? Like I love Joey Porter Jr. He's super long and press coverage skills and all that stuff. But is Joey Porter Jr. actually the best fit when you have to play the Dolphins twice a year? Whereas Deonte Banks, the same way Jonathan Jones in that same scheme, similar, runs 4.35. Jonathan Jones actually might be a good Deonte Banks type of comp. Jones is already on the Patriots. They just re-signed him because we're talking about a very good athlete. Not the most productive college player, but they've turned him into a good NFL player there in New England. So that's where I'm back and forth on Banks, right? The production profile is not great. There's some plays where he just doesn't look all that good, and then there's other plays where it's like, man, even when technique is not good, he's so fast.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to get beat deep because of his athleticism, and it shows up on the field. He's an intriguing player, and maybe even more intriguing for New England with what they do with corners, who they have to play. I kept Banks out of my first round mock last week. I think I like him in the 20s, but I can understand the reasoning maybe for New England at 14 where Banks makes sense.
Yeah, it's such a strange draft basically from this point on, you're either going to find spots where the need fits the value and it's great, or if that doesn't wind up being the case, there's a lot of picks where you're like, God, I hate this spot, but I've got to pick somebody. I would love to trade down. Basically, the entirety of the draft from this point on, where that isn't the case, where need doesn't meet value and they mesh perfectly, everyone else wants to trade back, but there isn't always a trade partner because everyone else is in that world as well. So, yeah, I think Banks makes a lot of sense for New England. I think his ability to be a man-cover corner, and for a guy that has all the tools in the world but is a little bit inconsistent, the tape's a little bit here and there, going to a Bill Belichick defense still feels like it's a good thing for that guy.
All right, man, that puts the Packers up at 15. This is your chalk pick here for the Packers. You love this one more than anything. Where are you going Packers here at 15?
If I can make it happen at all, I'm going to put Dalton Kincaid going to the Green Bay Packers because it's the most natural fit in the entire draft. Kincaid, tight end number 1 for me. His ability as a pass catcher is just completely unrivaled from anybody in this class. Like, he has potentially special receiving traits. And I still think there's juice to be had from that group of wide receivers that are all young. They've got Christian Watson, who showed a lot last season. They've got Romeo Doubs, who I think the preseason hype got out of control, but I think there was something behind it. Like, he's not just a preseason wonder. I think he can be a good receiver for them. They got Bo Melton from somewhere as well. I love that dude in the draft. They're like assembling the kind of receiver class that I would build on Football Manager, where you just get all the 21-year-old prospects you love and see what happens, you know? But you can add Kincaid to that, and you don't have to sort of add like a wide receiver. You can add a legit tight end receiving threat and let the whole lot develop together along with Jordan Love when you finally get rid of Aaron Rodgers, and everything's good. Love it.
I love when this happens, when you get so locked in. Like, have you even contemplated anyone else for the Packers?
God, no.
You're just fully expecting this.
Not as long as it's available.
This happened to me that one year. I only mocked Jack Conklin to the Bills. I was like, power scheme, they need a right tackle. Nothing else could ever happen. This is the best fit in the draft. Of course, it didn't happen. I think I only gave DeForest Buckner to the Chargers around that time, too, and then they got Joey Bosa. You know, it was like a whole – get locked into this thing that's going to happen.
Yeah, yes, I have, absolutely. But you look at the alternative options, right? You've got Tyree Wilson, who we just talked about. I just don't love relative to other people. In my mock here as 32 GMs, he's going to slip. The same thing with Christian Gonzalez. He's a lot of people's cornerback number 2. I don't think he's that good. I think his tape is concerning, despite the slick movement skills and everything he brings to the table. So, plus, the Packers have corners, so I'm not chasing that need. Quentin Johnston at wide receiver, I don't love him either. Like Jordan Addison, who I've been talking up, sure, but you kind of like the young guys you have. Jordan Addison versus Dalton Kincaid. I would skew towards the tight end, let the young guys at receiver develop. Offensive line, yeah, maybe, but I don't hate the guys we already have. I think they can function, so I'm not going to chase that need. Defensive line, okay, but I don't love the value, so I think Kincaid is the best value.
That puts the Commanders up on the clock at 16. I haven't seen this pick for the Commanders yet, but where are you going here, man?
Offensive line, Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. Tough spot for Washington. Don't love it. They've already made additions to the offensive line. They bring in Andrew Wiley in free agency, who can start at right tackle. They have Charles Leno at left tackle, who is solid. People hate solid, though, always. The fans are going to be looking to upgrade on Charles Leno as soon as humanly possible. Andrew Wiley might not even be solid, so I think if you could challenge him with somebody else, that would be fine.
Wiley could also play guard, and so people were.
And Samuel Cosby's been kicked inside to guard. Who knows how that's going to work? Overall, he was their tackle future at one point. It's a messy offensive line at the moment. Like, I don't think that they have anybody there who would make you go, we cannot. This guy's untouchable. He's our starter there. We're not going to mess with that. Take the best offensive line prospect you think is on the board and figure out how it works later on.
I think there's after Paris Johnson, as far as pure tackles go, Peter Skoronski, Paris Johnson, I think there's definitely some debate with Anton Harrison, with Broderick Jones, with Darnell Wright. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses. I think that's going to be a style thing.
Sure.
And, what have you seen from a guy like Broderick Jones? He's going to come up soon. Mm-hmm. Who has less experience versus a guy like Darnell Wright from Tennessee, who's got a 4-year starter. Is a 4-year starter who continued to get better, but early in his career wasn't great. So you're going Harrison, who's got a pretty good pass blocking profile here for the Commanders. Kind of similar to Charles Leno. You're better pass blocker than run blocker, and similar style as far as the grading profile goes.
Sort of like 2.5 years of play. All 3 years, though, were good pass blocking performances, good pass blocking grades. Gave up 1 sack last season, gave up 9 total pressures. I think he's a good prospect. He's got the athleticism. I think they need an upgrade on that offensive line, and as I say, figure out how it works, later.
Steelers up on the clock here at 17. Also in the mix for offensive line, maybe cornerback. Where are you going here for the Steelers?
Yeah, this is your little offensive line run. So I think Harrison goes at pick number 16. I think the Steelers would jump all over Broderick Jones at that point if that's the way it broke down. We've talked before. Their offensive line, the concerns are at tackle. You can debate whether it's left or right tackle, but they need a tackle, or they need to start looking at upgrading tackle. So Broderick Jones, my favorite of the remaining guys, you bring him in and upgrade Dan Moore.
So Broderick Jones going to come in, play left tackle for the Steelers. He's a common mock draft pick, so that's somewhat chalk there for Pittsburgh. I am intrigued. You don't love Christian Gonzalez, who's still on the board. I think that would be the Steelers fan pick, I think. Might be Christian Gonzalez.
I mean, at this point, yeah. I'm lower on Tyree Wilson and Christian Gonzalez, who are currently on the board and falling. So anybody that is, in line with the convention of thinking those guys are like edge 2, cornerback 2, are going to be, for the next however long they're on the board, they're going to be pounding the table to take them here.
All right, that puts the Lions back up on the board at 18. What'd you do here for the Lions, Sam?
Made them mad. This is where, look, I don't love Christian Gonzalez, but I'm willing to believe that the potential upside of if you can take an athlete that freaky and fluid and teach him how to play corner or get him playing better at corner, the upside is potentially through the roof. And I said a similar thing about Joey Porter at number 11. And I know they've already drafted a first-round corner, but stay with me for a moment and imagine a world where Jeffrey Okudah doesn't get any better because he hasn't really shown that he's going to. Where Emmanuel Mosley is, a guy that the 49ers weren't exactly desperate to keep around and is just your stopgap guy. And now all of a sudden you have a team ascending who is now the favorite to win the NFC North, and your cornerback situation craps out because you didn't do this. The absolute worst case here, well, no, the worst case is they both stink. The worst case that people are sort of concerned about is, why would you take 2 corners? That's redundant. What if they both work out and all of a sudden you've got 2 young, talented corners on rookie contracts and everything else doesn't get any better? And now you've averted a potential roadblock to your dominant future franchise by getting 2 guys.
So maybe you screwed up and forgot, but you didn't. You did this on purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me defend you here because doubling up at cornerback hits me solid, right? I love that. I enjoy that. Let me paint a picture for you here. This offseason, the Lions signed Cameron Sutton to a multi-year contract. Then they signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a slot safety hybrid. That's what he is. 1-year deal. Emmanuel Mosley, 1 year, $6 million contract. One of my axioms, Sam, is you are not drafting for just 1 year.
Correct.
Right? We are not drafting to fill the 2023 depth chart. And thankfully, we don't need to. We already did it. So now I flip my depth chart forward to 2024. And here's what my cornerback room looks like. Cameron Sutton. That's it.
The end?
That's it. Cameron Sutton, Chase Lucas. That's it. That's all they have on the 2024 depth chart for the Detroit Lions.
That's not great.
Right? So now, picture Cam Sutton, and then year 2, Christian Gonzalez, and year 2, Joey Porter Jr. Now that's your cornerback room. Then you sprinkle in, your backups and your 1-year flyers and all that stuff. So this would be a long-term play for the Lions.
Yep.
And then, by the way, in the short term, don't we think Joey Porter Jr. or Christian Gonzalez is competing with Emmanuel Mosley, is maybe just taking Jeffrey Okudah's job right now? Are one of them potentially better than Jeffrey Okudah, who has underachieved in his 3 years in the NFL? So I will defend you to the death, Sam.
Great.
That taking 2 of the top corners, if you're the Lions, is not redundant. You cannot be redundant at cornerback. You cannot be. Tactically, you need 3 or 4 to cover in a game. Strategically, you need 3, 4, or 5 to handle injuries and to mitigate risk, the fact that they might not be that good. If the Lions doubled up a corner and they got not only Joey Porter Jr., but also Christian Gonzalez, David Blau's brother-in-law, with the team connection there, yes. I think that would be a massive, non-redundant win for the Lions.
I mean, the thing is, even if Okudah takes a massive step forward and finally justifies his draft status next year, he's a free agent. So you got to either...
You're letting him walk. Yeah, Okudah's, in this scenario, I'm letting him walk. I don't think anybody's going to trade for him.
Well, you either let him walk or you have to pay him a giant amount of money coming off a contract year where he finally looked like the shutdown corner he was supposed to be. So either way, you would be smart to build in that level of contingency. And even if that happens, you still have at least one spot where you would quite like an upgrade at corner, right? Because you're not... I mean, Emmanuel Mosley's great in terms of you don't have to chase value, right? I don't have to go... I have to take a corner at 6 because if I don't, I'm screwed. You don't. You can start Emmanuel Mosley. Things will not be catastrophic. But if value matches, and I think it does in these situations, then you'd be smart to have an Emmanuel Mosley upgrade or replacement or alternative.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've said my piece. I think it makes sense if you go back to the way the Lions have built their team, right? In the trenches for a couple of years. They finally started to make some moves at receiver last year. They hit on an Amon-Ra St. Brown, which was outstanding.
Yep.
And now we said for a while, you need to do a lot of work in the secondary. I love that they did short-term work in the secondary so they don't have to force cornerback picks. At the same time, the way this draft falls, if this is the cornerbacks that were available, plus they picked up extra picks, the way they traded down, I think this is a home run for the Lions. I love your Lions mock draft. I think maybe more than anyone else. So I'm defending you, Sam.
Sweet. Like it.
Puts the Bucs up on the clock at 19.
It does. The Bucs at 19, I think, might have been interested in getting up for the C.J. Stroud thing. You know, when that started to happen, maybe they would have made some phone calls. I think it was just too far to go. So I think Tampa Bay, they just need defensive line help at this point. Lucas Van Ness was my top defender on the board. I think they bring him in. He adds that power element to the game. I think he can mesh with the players they already have on that defensive line and just help solidify the whole thing.
Yeah, Van Ness, big power rusher, could play inside and out. The Bucs, I mean, the Bucs can go a million different ways now because they've, post Tom Brady era, they've got offensive line needs. They have defensive line needs. They after a couple years of bringing the band back together after the Super Bowl, there's a lot more holes on the roster. They still have some good, solid pieces. There's still a decent foundation there in Tampa Bay. But, yeah, quarterback has to be in play. Replacing Donovan Smith at left tackle or replacing Tristan Wirfs at right tackle, whatever that might be. The Super Bowl team had much better defensive line depth, which has slowly been depleted. Plus, you have guys like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka who maybe haven't hit like they should have. So Bucs can go any which way here.
Yeah, and they've got, Tryon-Shoyinka hasn't become that player yet. Even if he, again, takes a step forward, I feel like he's going to be a fairly one-dimensional player. Shaq Barrett is reaching that age and has had those injuries. We are a little bit concerned about what he can do going forward. So, yeah, I just think they have the space for it now.
All right, that puts the Seahawks up at pick 20. This is also one of your favorite picks in the draft, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Jordan Addison to Seattle just makes a ton of sense. Look, whether or not you think he's the next the next Isaac Bruce, he's just good. He's good at everything. He can play inside and outside. He can win all levels of the defense. He is a great route runner. He understands defenses, route concepts, how to set up DBs. He might have a limited ceiling because he's not the fastest guy in the world, because he's not the biggest guy in the world, and because he probably isn't going to be a contested catch monster at those size and dimensions. But Seattle already has DK Metcalf, so they don't need like an all-world guy. We've reached the point in the draft now, number 20 overall, where just being a good NFL wide receiver is worth that value. So I think it makes sense.
Here's what's interesting, Sam. I just saw, just got pointed out to me, our friend Jim Nagy, who was on the show last week, director of the Senior Bowl. Again, I encourage people, go listen to our Jim Nagy discussion. Lots of great questions that I needed answered about the Senior Bowl process. Jim Nagy, former NFL scout. A lot of great stuff on that show. But he's basically saying, hey, I'm seeing 4 or 5 wideouts in mock drafts. He's spoken to numerous teams, per his tweet. Numerous teams that have only one first-round grade at the position, and that is JSN, Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. I'm not surprised by this, Sam, that a lot of teams are not high on the wide receiver class, particularly at the top. It reminds me, again, 2018 draft class where we were debating guys like Calvin Ridley, Michael Gallup, James Washington, Cortland Sutton. There was one other, DJ Moore. I think those are the 5 that were like the consensus top 5 that year. And the joke that we made was like, can we just put all these guys at 4?
Right.
And put them all at 5. There's no true number 1. Yeah. Calvin Ridley, I think, ended up being the first receiver off the board at 26.
Yeah, same thing. For the same reasons, I think. I mean, all the negatives that you hear about the top, I mean, we talk about it as a big 3, right? Smith and Jigba, Addison, Quentin Johnston. All the negatives you hear about certainly the 2 of those guys, the first 2, are things that the NFL doesn't like spending first-round picks on. Like if Smith and Jigba is just a slot receiver, the NFL doesn't like taking that in the first round. And that's like the one they're most certain on because of the certainty that we've been talking about. Addison's going to get talked about in that vein as well because he's tiny and slow.
Yeah,
so people are going to talk about him as a slot-only receiver.
You could shout Isaac Bruce all you want. They're going to see 170 pounds and 4.55 and say, I don't want that in the first round.
Yeah.
Right? Quentin Johnston, I think the same concerns that we have watching the film. Yeah, he's big. Yeah, he's fast. We're a couple years removed from DK Metcalf, who's better, bigger and faster going in the second round. I mean, and A.J. Brown going in the second round.
Yeah, he's the different one where we're not complaining about, well, he's a slot only. He's just a guy that isn't that great playing wide receiver.
I'm talking about the overall evaluation of receivers. People are going to look at Addison and Quentin Johnston. And honestly, I think the same concerns that we have with Zay Flowers. You know, is he the 4th best receiver in the draft per a lot of people? Yeah. Is he near the top? Yeah. I mean, people are going to have the same concerns. He's a slot only for certain people.
Right.
Right? For certain teams.
So I think, yes, I 100% buy into the idea that there are going to be plenty of teams that do not have many, if any, first-round grades on this wide receiver class. Now, I think there's a difference between saying that and not spending a first-round pick on them because I think generally this feels like a draft where there aren't a ton of first-round grades, period, across the board. Like I think there are way more first-round picks than there are first-round grades on players available in this draft. And yet you get to the back 10 picks of this draft, you got to pick somebody. So people are going to get selected that don't have first-round grades. But I think this is not a great wide receiver draft at the top, but I do like the depth. Like once you get into the second round, there's a ton of guys that I love to bring in.
Not to respond to everybody in the chat, but somebody in the chat said, you guys were idiots for taking DK and AJ so low. Learn from your mistakes.
Gotcha.
Well, we actually had them both 1 and 2 in our receiver rankings and absolutely said they should be first-round picks. Had them in the first round quite a bit. I'm just talking about the NFL as a whole. The reason why I'm more inclined to take receivers and corners in the first round is because you need more of them. I've made this statement before. You need more of them. There are 3 starters at each position. There's only 2 starting tackles. There's 2 starting edge defenders, right? These guys are starters. You need like a wide receiver 2/3 in the first round isn't crazy to me because it is a starter. So
receiver is also a position I think where you can hide the flaws more,
right?
Therefore, maximize the things they do well. So the value thing is, I think teams are still behind the curve of focusing on what a guy can't do, which for certain positions is important. When the guy has to be out there every single snap and what he can't do is actually really relevant to how good he's going to be, is very different to playing a guy at receiver and saying, all right, he can't do this, so let's simply never ask him to do that. And let's maximize the fact that the thing he's good at is insane. And even if that means he can only play 500 snaps in a game and he can only play in the slot, if he's unstoppable in that role, who cares?
The challenging thing, I think, is there is a good history of getting second-round wide receivers.
Yeah.
The NFL tends to value them there.
Right.
How do you balance the analytics of we should wait at receiver versus like, well, when you hit on a Deebo Samuel, you end up having to pay him a ton of money a year early. Like, what if you should have just taken Deebo in the first? You should have just taken DK and A.J. Brown in the first. Anyway, you're going Addison in the first to complement Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and I think that's a great way to maximize Geno Smith and his production.
Mm-hmm.
Chargers at 21. They're up.
The Greek Trojan, an interesting name, in the chat says it's first time in the chat, but it feels like there's way too much positive reinforcement for the troll takes. Probably why they keep posting. effectively we are the architect of our own trolling by referencing them all the time.
Oh, I just respond to a couple things that stand out.
Anyway, Chargers, number 21. So this is an interesting pick because this is one of those situations where I don't love the player selected. I ended up drafting Quentin Johnston for them, wide receiver from TCU, who we just talked about. Like, he's Renner's number one wide receiver in the draft. Renner loves this dude. There's graphics out there on the main PFF account where it's like, wide receiver rankings over the past several years, right? And he has him ranked way above guys like Jerry Jeudy and people that are quite clearly better receivers than he is. But he loves him. So when I first started watching wide receivers, he was the first guy I watched because he's number one on our draft board. And my initial reaction was like messaging Renner. I'm like, are you certain that the TCU wide receiver isn't in fact bad? Because he's just not that good playing wide receiver. But what's the one thing the Chargers offense really, really wants?
Speed, man.
Yeah.
Speed.
So, and look, you can say Josh Downs brings you that. Zay Flowers brings you that. Sure. And Tank Dell brings you that. And look, I thought about Tank Dell at this spot. Here's where I thought I'm going to play the game, though, because nobody else is as high on Tank Dell as I am. I can get Tank Dell around later.
Yeah, you're understanding the board
Right.
and the consensus board. It's not so.
Even though it's me, as the other 31 GMs as well. Like, I know I can get Tank Dell later.
I also think, man, you can. Sorry to interrupt, but like I can convince myself Quentin Johnston for the Chargers.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's the thing.
All right, go ahead.
So
Cover Quentin
Yeah.
Johnston and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen.
Right.
And Josh Palmer.
It's like I don't love a lot of his game playing wide receiver, but I am willing to buy into the things that he's really good at. A lot of that straight line speed stuff, a lot of the catch a hitch, turn upfield, turn 10 yards into 30 yards, catch the quick slant or the shallow drag and just do something with that after the catch. And you already have Mike Williams to be your contested catch dude. You already have a more well-rounded wide receiver in Keenan Allen. The deficiencies that he has, you've already got covered. What you need is the guy that can scare people with straight line speed. And even though his 40 time was relatively average, he showed up very well in the tracking data speed. Like, he clearly has vertical threat to him. So I like it.
Good. Sorry, I'm in the middle of typing, telling people, hey, I want to chop up my Lions. Little diatribe there where I defended you.
Okay.
Thought there was some good info in there. Yeah, I love Quentin Johnston here for the Chargers for the same reasons, right? Don't love the player overall, but I can understand, and I could see the fit here for the Los Angeles Chargers. That puts the Ravens on the clock here at 22. Still have Tyree Wilson in a free fall here.
Yep.
Because you're the GM.
Yeah. And it's going to continue because I'm going to select an edge rusher, but it's not going to be Tyree Wilson. Nolan Smith, the Georgia edge rusher, who is like the antithesis of Tyree Wilson in terms of size. Smaller guy, under 240 pounds, tiny, but is lightning quick, posted an insane workout at the combine, is really productive on a per snap basis. So you might look at their overall numbers and be like, well, Tyree Wilson's been a better pass rusher than Nolan Smith. But on a per snap, per rush basis, it's not really true. Nolan Smith hasn't had the same volume of play time necessarily because that Georgia defense is freaking loaded and they rotate through everybody. Like Jalen Carter. Remember when Jordan Davis was coming out? The guy had never had like a season with more than 350 snaps. And you're like, clearly a guy that weighs like 400 pounds can't be trusted to be on the field for more than 350 snaps. You get tired. I mean, Jalen Carter has barely played more than Jordan Davis. Like, no matter how good you are, Georgia's just so deep that they just rotate everybody constantly. So he hasn't had necessarily the full every down playing time, but has been a dynamo on the edge, really good against the run as well. I just think perfect Ravens player to me.
Yeah, we do want to do our edge rankings. That might be pushed to next week, but Nolan Smith, he's a tough one for me, man. I think there's a lot of data points that say yes, he's coming off the injury. The fact that he's under 240 pounds, that works against him.
What's the model say?
The model likes, doesn't love, but I think there's ways to, if you add in some missing data points, you can get to love.
We were saying,
but then when you adjust it for like, hey, this guy's like guys that are under 240,
right?
Maybe
we could
there's a couple of those edges in the draft class Nick Herbig from Wisconsin is going to
Yeah.
be fascinating. Will McDonald from Iowa State.
Maybe we could use my idea for the podcast instead of the draft show. You know, for you guys call
when
it
you do the picks?
Family Feud, right? Is that what it's called over here?
Yeah.
What the hell is it called in the UK? Family something. It's not Feud, but anyway, their thing was like, you know, you give your answer. It's like our survey says. You look up the thing, and it's like a giant X comes across. I just think we should use that for the model.
With the model?
You know, Nolan Smith. The model says
Ding, ding, ding.
right, and then either an for Tyree Wilson or a bing.
Well, you're going to get it. Your next pick, that's a very Ravens pick, I think. The Nolan Smith selection at 22. Figure out what they have to do at quarterback. But Nolan Smith's a good, solid choice.
Family
there.
Fortunes. That's what it's called in the UK.
You guys are much kinder. We feud over here.
Feud.
You know, inducing riots in between families. Who's on the clock next? This pick's going to get an
Yes. So the Ravens select their edge rusher. That brings up the Minnesota Vikings at pick number 23, a spot where the Vikings, I think, would desperately love to trade down, as has been the case for, I think, several of these teams. Vikings, as we said last year, traded down a lot. Like, that's been a crazy thing. Let's build up the draft picks. Let's take more swings. This is the first time, though, where I think they might have a trade partner. Kansas City, all the way down in pick number 31. The team trying to, you know, protect their position as prohibitive favorites in the NFL every single year. The presumptive starter as this is the Super Bowl team until somebody takes it away from them. They bring in, they let both their tackles walk effectively. And they bring in a guy in free agency to come in and flip him to the left side of the line, but whatever.
Jawan Taylor.
Yes, from Jacksonville. Pay him $20 million a year to do that. You still kind of have an open spot. And are you really comfortable going into the season with the options that you have at right tackle? Prince Tena Nwogu, right? That's going to be one of them. Lucas Niang, Darian Kennard, the guy you drafted a year ago. Maybe there's a capable starter from that group. Are you certain of it? I'm not. So with this run on offensive linemen, they've been going. The left tackles are all gone. Darnell Wright from Tennessee is still sitting there, a guy that Renner shot up the board in the latest big board revision, and a guy with right tackle experience, which is not that common amongst this group. I think Kansas City could easily look at that and say, this is worth the trade up. It's not going to cost us that much to jump this far. We're going to trade to 23. We're going to grab Darnell Wright. That's the model. The model says
Model doesn't like Darnell Wright. I've had some questions about Darnell Wright. I like the film. I understand his head-to-head with Will Anderson was fantastic and all of that stuff because the model takes into account all 4 years.
See, the model needs to, accept that people grow.
They do.
People develop.
I will do some tweaking the same way I did with Tyree Wilson. Yeah, I'll do some.
Because that was you.
Let me input just the last 2 years, maybe, for Darnell Wright.
Just last year.
But just last year. Just like we've talked about one-year wonders at other positions, it's not a great hit rate for one-year wonder tackles. Now, this is one of those, a little bit like Zay, where my heart's saying yes, though. The film's saying yes. There's some explosive run blocking snaps from Darnell Wright. But I do trust the numbers a lot at offensive tackle. Like a couple years ago, the Browns left tackle from Alabama. Why can't I remember his name right now?
Jedrick Wills.
In hindsight here, the numbers hated him the most.
Yeah.
And of that group, he's been the worst. Mekhi Becton got hurt, but that year was Andrew Thomas.
Yep.
It was Tristan Wirfs and Jedrick Wills. There was not a lot of numbers that said, yeah, he's the hit. I mean, the tackle numbers are interesting. Anyway, the move itself for the Chiefs.
And the Alabama game
realistic.
against Will Anderson was really impressive. He didn't give up a single pressure against Georgia. Like, he had some legit tapes last year and looked really good doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of
stupid model.
Yeah. He might still be he could be an outlier. It's just personally, I'm not going to go for those types of outliers.
Well, that's
much
fine.
like the next guy.
That's fine.
No, the Chiefs move is interesting. Go get a right tackle. A lot of people, when they talk about the Chiefs move, and it's like, go get a playmaker, go get Zay Flowers, go get these guys. But solidifying right tackle with Jawan Taylor moving to left tackle seems like a realistic type of move here for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think these teams that have been in this sort of arms race to win a Super Bowl and stay in the position to win a Super Bowl. I think those are all sort of prime candidates to do something aggressive and trade up at the bottom end of this first round, into this kind of position. So whether it's Kansas City, whether Cincinnati loves a guy and thinks that that guy can put him over, Buffalo, I think all those kind of teams that we anticipate being the contenders and the teams that need to sort of one up the other, I think they're all fairly live threats to make a move like this happen. And in this draft, I thought Kansas City made the most sense.
All right, that puts the Jags up at 24. Where are you going for Jacksonville?
Didn't like it. Didn't love it. But here's where I'm willing to take the gamble on Tyree Wilson. Honestly, in a vacuum, I'm not even sure I'd spend a first-round draft pick on Tyree Wilson. But we've talked before. This is a world of there's not 31 first-round grades, in my opinion, in this draft class. You're going to have to pick somebody. If you stay in this pick and you can't get back, you're going to have to draft somebody, and you're probably not going to have a first-round grade on them. So by definition, you're not going to get value. I'm willing to run the risk, though, that I'm off and other people are right. There are people that think Tyree Wilson is the best edge rusher, rather, in this draft, ahead of Will Anderson. I think that's crazy, but I don't have a strike rate of 100%. I'm not batting 1,000, so I'm willing to take a look at the wisdom of the crowds and say, you know what? A lot of information says this is incredible value right now. And even if I don't necessarily think it is, I'm willing to say, absent of glaring better options. And, Bijan Robinson is the best player available by a mile, but I already have a good backfield. I don't need to bring him in. I don't think that necessarily propels me forward in any direction. So absent that, do I think that there's a better bet in Brian Brzee, Miles Murphy, the wide receivers, Michael Mayer, tight end, corner? Not really. So I think I'm willing to be a little bit humble, to have a little bit of humility and say, maybe I'm not right on Tyree Wilson. And if I'm wrong and he's the guy, it's a jackpot pick.
And you get to watch Tyree Wilson and Trayvon Walker develop with each other there. So you're calling humility here. I'm taking this guy in the first round. People are going to say, well, you're crazy because he's going top 7, right? I mean, That's what the answer is going to be. But I think this is why this exercise is interesting, right? Because this is going to happen in draft rooms, right? Some draft rooms are going to have Tyree Wilson as like the third player on the board, and others might have him at 28, but you're never going to know it. You're never going to actually know. And then of the other hundreds of evaluators across the NFL, people put a third-round grade on Zach Wilson a couple years ago. Would have been like, oh, you're just being different. You're just being crazy. People are going to have second, thirds on Tyree Wilson. Don't touch, love, blue chip. They're going to have all these different grades on Tyree Wilson. The interesting thing here to me, getting him at 24 if you're the Jags, that's where I would have taken Trayvon Walker last year. I would have taken him in the 20s, right? Like that's where I want to take that guy that could hit, right? That could hit, that has this completely different body type, that might buck the trend, that might, outproduce previous production numbers. I'll take that in the 20s. Mm-hmm. I would absolutely take that. But I would rather let someone else take the top 10 gamble. You know what I mean? So if you're the Jags and this is available, I get it. Like you have Josh Allen heading into his last year as an edge defender. If you do figure this out with Trayvon Walker and Tyree Wilson as well.
Last year, and also the fact that you have him should not prevent you making this kind of pick. Like Josh Allen played 1,000 snaps last year. That's insane. He plays basically every single snap, on one side of the line, and then Trayvon Walker is the guy they want doing it on the other side. I would much rather split up 2,000 snaps amongst 3 players and have each one of them playing, a little under 700 snaps. That's way better for an efficiency standpoint. So, again, if all 3 of them pan out, it's not redundant. You should make that work. Like, it's better having 3 guys that you can distribute 2,000 snaps between than it is 2, particularly when one of the 2 hasn't really shown that much yet.
Yeah, I like it. I think it makes sense. I'm far more willing to take the Tyree Wilson. Yeah, again, because you could talk yourself into last year was better, and he's gotten better, and he wasn't. His pass rush production in his final year was way better than Trayvon Walker's. Again, it just happened at like age 23, later in his career, that type of thing. So you can talk yourself into that's what he is now. That's what he's going to do at the next level. I'd just rather take it in the 20s. Giants at 25. It's a copycat league here, Sam.
Yes. And I am copycatting your draft pick because I liked it a lot. John Michael Schmitz, center from Minnesota. Again, Giants don't love the spot. This is write this down for every one of the remaining picks. Don't love the spot. I have to pick somebody. So if I'm picking somebody, maybe you can get – I thought about doing the same thing as the Tank Dell pick, right? Can I get John Michael Schmitz a round later? Everyone's going to be lower on him than we are. I can probably get him later. But if you don't, I think there is a drop-off. We're talking about sort of 3 high-end centers in this draft, and they're kind of put together in a lump. I think John Michael Schmitz is better than the other remaining options. So I want to get that one, and I don't want to run the risk that he'll be there a round later. So I'm snagging him now.
Go listen to my explanation on last week's mock draft. Go check that out. I think I made the strong case for John Michael Schmitz. Agree, you could play the board and get him later, but I think the value would be perfectly fine here, getting him at 25, starting center for the Giants. Dallas Cowboys at 26, Sam. Another pick. You got a few picks that you just like consistently across the board here, and this is one of them.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson. Makes sense.
Here he is.
It's the Jerry Jones pick, but I like it as well. Like, I'm not – we've reached the point. I thought about it for Jacksonville. I decided it probably didn't move the needle enough for them. We're in this range now. We're absent of clear, great first-round options that I love. I'm willing to say this dude is special. Like, Bijan Robinson will move the needle more than a regular running back in any given first round will, and particularly when the situation is already good. Like, I don't have to do what the Steelers tried to ask of Najee Harris, which is our running game is not functioning right now. Come in and fix it single-handedly. That's unreasonable. That's not going to work. If the running game's already good, now come in and just be the value add, like be the thing that adds more to the system than a random running back can. That is what I think he can do. And you bring him into this Dallas offense that's already kind of cooking, that's added receiver help, that should have a good offensive line, that has Tony Pollard coming off the injury, but clearly they like him more as a change-up guy than the true every-down workhorse. Either that or they simply refuse to ever back away from their bad decision of the Zeke Elliott contract. But, that thunder and lightning combination again of Bijan, Tony Pollard, I just think for Dallas that makes a ton of sense.
This is Jerry. Jerry's over there twisting your arm in the room too. It's like
Jerry definitely likes it, but look, myself and Jerry relate, as a billionaire and a man who has an intimate connection with the mind of a billionaire. We're on the same wavelength there.
You can see this happening.
I'm going to get Bijan, then I'm going to give him a very dark visor so I don't blind him the first time he plays in our stadium in September.
They'll trade up to get him before.
No, Jerry might. I'm going to have patience.
Jerry, okay. So you're going to have patience.
Mm-hmm.
So you're good with Bijan at this point.
Yeah. And I think, look, at this point, it's value. Like, he might be the best player in the draft as a pure, all positions created equal big board. If you said, who is the most talented football player in this draft, it's Bijan Robinson, it's Jalen Carter. That's probably your either or. So you're talking about a guy that should be 1 on a big board if value didn't have anything to do with it. He's already slipped to 26 because value does have something to do with it. But at this point, I don't have a bunch of options. Like the gap between him, this is the debate, right, that we had with Rick Spielman or whoever else we talked to about player value. This is the conversation. It's I have a dude who's a blue chip, who's maybe number 1 on an abstract big board versus other positions that are way more valuable. And now I've let him slip to 26, and I've got like edge 4, whatever we're at. I've got wide receiver 3 in a group that isn't good, or wide receiver 4 rather in a group that isn't good. I've got cornerback 4 or 5. Like that's the conversation, right? It's how far down this list of guys that I don't love but are at more valuable positions do you go before you say this is the best value? Like it is.
All fair, man. Bijan.
Yeah.
You would take him over a starting tight end. You would take him over a good tight end, a good linebacker.
So if
other position.
If Kincaid was here, I would take Kincaid over Bijan. But he isn't. Mayer's the tight end, and I don't love Mayer. I don't love what he does enough to make that switch. So I think, again, that's the conversation. Like, it's where in that list does he slot before you think the running back makes more sense?
All right, man. Cowboys at 26. I think that is realistic. I mean, I think the league has caught on enough that you don't want You don't want to take running backs in the top 15. I think he still could go second half of the first round any point. Maybe this is lower than where he goes on draft night, but there'll be somebody in the teens or the 20s, I think, that takes Bijan Robinson. Some team will. Bills at 27. Where are you going here for Buffalo?
So cornerback.
Another corner.
Yes. And it won't be the corner most people are expecting, I wouldn't think. I went
Wait, who's left on the board here?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Who's the corner people might be expecting?
Hang on, let me get this by
position.
Cam
Smith. You're going Cam Smith.
So Emmanuel Forbes is still on the board. Your guy, Tyreek Stevenson, is still on the board. It's Emmanuel Forbes, rather, is the guy that people would be expecting.
Forbes is slightly higher, I think, than Cam Smith in consensus. They're close, though.
But I went with Cam Smith.
Yeah.
I think Cam Smith, he's my next corner available in terms of ability. I think that guy could be really good at the next level. Like, he's got the complete package to put together. I absolutely think he's worth a low first-round pick for a team like Buffalo. Again, Buffalo might be interested in trading up to other spots, but if this is how the board felt, I don't think there's anything wrong with Cam Smith at 27.
I haven't watched an NFL draft in many years because we're live, we're covering the draft, right? But I'm hosting your mock draft here, like Chris Berman would for ESPN.
Okay.
You'd be like mid conversation about something. It'd be like the Bills could go running back here, and then he'd be like, the other thing they could do is maybe cornerback, maybe I don't know, like South Carolina guys, maybe. Maybe Cam Smith could be the pick here. Let's go to the commissioner and find out. With the 27th pick, the Buffalo Bills select quarterback Cam Smith, South Carolina. Wow, it's a big surprise. Got it in my ear. That's how I'm handling this. I'm like giving the answers as we talk through it here.
Yeah.
I like Cam Smith for the fit for Buffalo. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Even though they went Kyer Elam last year in the first round.
They did.
You have Tre'Davious White. You have Teron Johnson. Is this overkill at cornerback?
I don't think it's overkill. I mean, Kyer Elam couldn't crack the starting lineup last year outside of injuries. I mean, he was behind Christian Benford, the other rookie, the 6th-round rookie. So can Kyer Elam develop? Absolutely. But it's all about a team like Buffalo expects, again, to be contending. You need as many options and as much contingency. That secondary got beat to hell last year, and they really could have used somebody like that. So is it overkill? I mean, it's getting towards that, but I don't hate it for the position value. I think that's an important position. It insulates you against some of these injuries again. And, again, what are your alternatives, right? Would they like a linebacker to pair next to Matt Milano? Sure. Do you see one that you would love at this spot? Not really. Would they love defensive line, particularly on the interior? Absolutely. Do you see an interior defensive line that you would want to take in the 20s in this draft? No. Kalijah Kancey's already gone. Offensive line, maybe. You're not in a great spot here, which is why I think that they're potential, trade up candidate.
All right, that puts the Bengals up on the clock at number 28. They're one of the teams I feel like personally I've been locked into just a couple players, but there's a few different ways the Bengals could go here depending on how you're trying to future-proof the roster with Joe Burrow and the receivers ready to get paid. Where are you going here for the Bengals at 28?
Bengals, I think, will go in this situation with Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. Just makes a ton of sense for them. Like, that's a spot, again, where I think value and need does kind of match up. I don't love Mayer, but I think he's worth a first-round pick somewhere at the back end. And, yeah, if they can snag him at this spot, I think that's great for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mayer could be really productive if you have those outside options, right? When you have Jamar Chase, you have T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, whatever the future looks like for the Bengals. And I guess every time I'm thinking of Cincinnati, I'm thinking like 2 to 3 years in advance here. I'm trying to think of what the future looks like if you can't pay everybody or whatever it might be. So to me, a lot of their picks have to be centered around that. If they do have to spend so much money on Burrow and 2 receivers, is it Trey Hendrickson insurance that you need? Is it more corner insurance that you need? Is it just, all right, we're only going to compete with the Chiefs if we are elite on offense, and we'll make sure that offense always has options. Is it more offensive line help, right? To me, the Bengals always have they have all these different ways that they can go. I like Mayer a lot. I like him as a player. I do like the value here as far as the fit. I love the way he works the middle of the field, and I think he's the type of player that gives you different ways of winning in the pass game when you're going to rely on your big two, but there's going to be some games where just like TJ Hawkinson took over for the Vikings in certain games, I could see that with Mayer in games for the Bengals. So I like that a lot as a pick.
Yeah, I think you could think corner as well. Like Forbes would make some sense there. I like the corner and the wide receiver group more in the second round generally. So if you're starting to reach a point where the guys that are high on your list have already gone, I think I would wait, particularly if you have somebody like Mayer who fits a need and is, one of the best players in his position. I think that makes more sense for Cincy.
All right, just a few more picks left to get the Saints up on the clock here at 29. They have not traded up.
No.
At this point.
Because it's me in charge. I'm not doing it.
You're not doing it.
Miles Murphy, though, edge rusher from Clemson. We talked about him a little bit before. He's got that sort of prototypical traits type of thing. So this is like he's a New Orleans pick because they're big fans of the traits type of stuff. Obviously, it's me as the GM. I think it makes sense anyway. Like at this point, I like the traits as well. I think his production has been okay. He comes in and replaces what they lost in Davenport. That defensive line needs significant influx of talent anyway. Do you love sort of other alternative options along the defensive line more than him? No. A spot where I don't love the value, but I think it's good.
There are elements of his game that remind me a little bit of Marcus Davenport. I don't know if he's got the most polished pass rush moveset, but he is just powerful.
Yeah.
275 with just power. He might be a better run defender than pass rusher. I think the edge class, I think people are high on the edge class, and I don't know if I'm as consistently high on the edge class. I think there'll be a bunch of good players, maybe not great. I think Murphy's got a chance to be safe, good, whatever it might be, however you want to lay that out. So I like this pick for the Saints at 29, value-wise. I've seen Murphy all over the place, man.
Yeah.
He's been top 10 at one point. He's been in the 20s. I don't know where his stock's going to end up, but if he ends up at back end of the first round, I'd be thrilled, I think, with Miles.
Definitely, yeah. He's another one of those players, I think, where I don't think I would have a first-round grade on him, but if you're picking at this spot, there's nobody left with a first-round grade, so I'm happy with this value.
Eagles back up on the clock now at pick 30. So already went Brian Branch, the versatile safety and nickel at pick 10. Where are you going here, pick 30 for the Eagles?
We're going to keep adding to the defense. I'm going to go with Jack Campbell, the linebacker from Iowa. I think that gives you some flexibility in terms of Nakobe Dean. They lost multiple linebackers in that defense in the offseason. Now Jack Campbell comes in with this prototypical 6'5", 250-pound frame with a lot of skills to the table versus Nakobe Dean, who's, 6'1", 217 or something like that. I just think that gives you now more flexibility to be able to put both those guys in the right spot within your defense rather than shoehorning Nakobe Dean into where you need him most.
I was trying to use #VaultMe in a tweet, and it had a little typo in there. That's what happens when you're trying to tweet here in the podcast.
Well done.
You don't have to talk me into Jack Campbell.
Right.
Take him late first. Love Jack Campbell. Love the fit for Buffalo at 27. Eagles. So a lot of people got into the groupthink of just trench players for the Eagles, and you said, nope, we're going hypothetical, lower value positions, hypothetically a safety and a linebacker. But I think you're also getting, much like the Ravens last year, two starters, right? You're getting two very good starters, two players with very good starting potential.
Yeah, and I still absolutely want to add some defensive linemen to this team, but didn't see the value where they were picking, and I think there's depth in those spots, particularly at edge, so they can come back, at the bottom of the second round, right, and do that. Or that's probably as late as you would want to do that and get an impact player, but I think they can get a guy at like 62, I think is where they pick, and still have him be part of that rotation.
All right, wrap it up, man. The Vikings have traded down from 23 to 31, so the Vikings are now picking at pick 31, last pick of the first round. Where are you going?
Brian Brzee, the defensive tackle from Clemson, Miles Murphy's teammate. He's a guy that's going to be slipping, I think, down this draft. I think there are reasons to be concerned about his production, about his overall play. But I think there's some reasons for that are reasonable, and he could end up being a better NFL player than he was a college player. Again, like in this world where nobody's left with a first-round grade, I think this is a gamble worth taking.
Yeah, Bresee's an interesting prospect. Again, the production's like kind of hit or miss. You could see the potential there as a pass rusher. He's very high cut as a defensive tackle.
2 years with a pass rushing grade above 80. but only just above 80.
Yeah.
A lot of sort of missed time through a variety of different reasons. There's a lot of potential. He was a really high recruit, right?
Yeah, he's one of those guys, like if he went back to school and you could see him putting up a 90 pass rushing grade this year and being a top 5 pick next year type of thing, right? So are you getting him a year earlier in his development just because he's only played 900-something snaps in his career? Are you actually getting him a year early? It's kind of like the Gregory Rousseau pick a couple of years ago with the Bills where he opted out. You didn't get to see his final season, but it probably would have been really productive, and he probably would have been a top 10 pick after that season. But the data itself wasn't screaming, hey, go get this guy.
And I don't want to turn this into like, ESPN's draft coverage where all they did is focus on family matters and, incredibly inappropriate things. But his younger sister died like during a season, and I have no earthly idea what kind of impact that makes on a guy. But it can't be good. It can only have been a bad thing. So whatever impact you want to put on that as something he had to deal with and battle through and, get past on a personal level, I think you can absolutely make an argument that affected the guy's play. And again, there's higher potential than we have seen realized so far.
I think this is cleaner value, too. Percy was a guy, again, I think a million people got top 10, top 15 hype at some point in the draft process. I think him landing in the 25 to 50 range is probably the right spot for Percy. And, it makes sense for the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it, man. First round mock. It's over at PFF.com. Any other? Who's left? Do we have? We don't have a who's left here.
Will McDonald was.
Is there anybody that you were itching to get into the first round that you just did, or that you were considering?
Yeah, I wanted to try and find a spot for DeJuan Jones, the behemoth right tackle from Ohio State. Couldn't really make it happen. People are going to want to see Zay Flowers in there. I'm comfortable with him falling out of the first round, particularly when you add in the stuff that Jim Nagy was talking about, that the NFL generally is lower on this receiving group. I think they should be, and I am lower on Zay Flowers and other people. The Tyree Wilson slip was stopped. The Christian Gonzalez slip to the middle of the first round was stopped. So, I think that's probably the guys that we need to talk about in terms of falling, right? Nobody else. A glaring omission.
I don't have everything in front of me, but that sounds right. It's a good draft. Good mock draft. I probably didn't push back on you enough. Probably didn't challenge you enough.
No.
But I agreed with some things. The Lions thing in particular. I stand by you.
Well, that's
on
the thing
Lions.
people are going to hate the most.
That's the thing that the people the Howie fans for Philadelphia already tearing you apart.
Well, they don't like, even when they do the things that the things that Howie would do are the things they hate the most.
What if last year we mocked a trade for A.J. Brown and picking Jordan Davis? They would hate that probably.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, they hated Jalen Hurts. Here's the deal. Is it enough time to do our draft bet show tomorrow?
Yeah.
Is this enough time?
We've already had emails come in. We've had 3 emails already since
okay,
we've been
great.
doing this.
Get your emails in right now. NFL podcast at PFF.com. You can tweet at us if you really want to. Try to tweet at PFF NFL Pod on Twitter.
Though, frankly, it would be easier if you emailed and put, draft bet.
It would be easier to email, but I want people to follow us at PFF NFL
That'd be
Pod
great.
on Twitter. But email is the best way to get it. NFL podcast at PFF.com. So this was just a little history here, by the way. Back 2012, I ran a draft site for a year, and we started something called Vault Me, right? It was called Draft Hub, and we had hashtag Vault Me, which that was the hashtag that I just
misused,
misspelled. The Vault Me hashtag is still going. That was for people to just say, hey, I believe this player's a top 10 player. I believe this will be the best player in the draft, whatever it is. And you'd say Vault Me. This was your way of saying, put it in the vault, it's happening. We'll revisit and we'll take a look at it. So this will be our version of doing that. We'll call it the PFF NFL Podcast, Vault Me or something like that. I think draft bets, it's not like what we did before the season where we firmly believe something's going to happen and you firmly believe it won't happen. This can be anything. We want your boldest takes. We want your, just put your name on the line. And if you told me your team will never do this, you tell me, you say, our team will never do this. Howie will never draft 2 non-trench players or whatever it might be.
We're in pre-draft mode. Everybody loves talking in absolutes. This will never happen. 0% chance. 100% this team will do whatever if a guy's available. So, put it out there. What will absolutely not happen? throw a bet out there, and if we like them, we'll accept them, and the winners will get a free PFF Plus subscription.
Oh yeah, we're trying to give stuff away here. And then if you guys want to put your name on the line with some coffee or something like that, of course, we're always willing to take.
Always take free coffee.
Always take coffee bets. So NFL podcast at pff.com. Please, let's do it. And then tomorrow we'll take some in the chat if they come up, if they're really strong. We'll get Walt can finally put his name on the line on some stuff instead of telling us how stupid we are. So that's it. That's what we'll do.
Yeah, there had better be a Walt bet in there at some point.
Yeah, Walt, put your name on the line.
The amount of stuff he's talked in the chat, and if there isn't a bet coming in from Walt, that's a disappointing lack of his own confidence in his own convictions.
My all-time favorite one is when somebody declared that Taco Charlton would never be the Dallas Cowboys pick in the first round. And he was.
Yeah.
Maybe he was right that he shouldn't have been. But he was predicting what the Cowboys were going to do, and he was wrong. Some dude on Twitter. All right. Some dude on Twitter. Bring it. Bring all your best draft takes for tomorrow's PFF NFL podcast. I'll be in here tomorrow. We'll have Renner on Wednesday, and we got Dane Brugler coming out on Thursday. That's the week. And then there'll be something Friday. All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow for our draft takes, draft bets show.